Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The New York Giants are set to hire John Harbaugh as their new head coach. Uh, was really hoping that it was going to play out this way. So many things had to happen right. I mean, timing is key here. Where the Giants had an opening at the head coaching spot after firing Brian Dable midseason, and John Harbaugh and the Ravens go their separate ways. And you know, it'd be easy to say, oh, well, if Tyler Loop makes the field goal against the Ravens, against the Steelers in the last game of the season, that, Harbaugh sticks around. But it seems like they were going to part ways. I mean, who knows? Maybe if the Ravens make a run in the playoffs, it's a different story. But it just seemed like there was rumblings as far as John Harbaugh was concerned, during the season and ultimately. And I think it was really the Ravens owner that was the driving force in this really coming to fruition. But ultimately, John Harbaugh is cut loose, and I was hopeful that the Giants were going to be able to land him, but things haven't exactly worked out for the Giants in recent years, and it seemed as if he was, still going to maybe visit the Titans and the Falcons, to some degree, but the Giants met with him earlier today, and he literally did leave the building. But you leave the day, I mean, technically it goes from January 14th to January 15th, but you get the point where they are able to get this done. As we're recording this, it's not 100% official, but all indications are that John Harbaugh is going to be the new head coach of the Giants. And, I think he's going to be paid as one of the, highest NFL head coaches in the history of the game, which really isn't surprising given the situation. Look, this is a very desperate Giant franchise that needs a lot of help. And, I had spoke, on our last episode with my producer, Casey, about how going into next season, I really, was frustrated to the point where coming off of, Joe Schoen being retained and all indications that Joe Schoen will still be here. And I think that'll still be the case, but I think his role is it's going to be a little bit different, right? I mean, I think that John Harbaugh is going to have a lot of say in decisions. Now, you don't want John Harbaugh is a head coach, right? He's not a general manager. So it's going to be collaborative, but I think that obviously, Shane, on the one hand, if you're Joe Shane, you're happy that you've hired a head coach that can really kind of help you and propel you. On the other hand, if the struggles do continue for the Giants, Joe Shane will be gone, will be the first one gone, and John Harbaugh will stick around despite those potential struggles. But, I was really frustrated to the point where I was likely going to root for the Giants week one, but it was the first time ever where it's like, you know what, all these meaningless end of season wins to squander major draft capital. And I'm still frustrated by that. I think that was a big missed opportunity. If the Giants had the #1 pick, you would have had multiple teams vying for that with Fernando Mendoza, going to be the unanimous for sure #1 pick. And so now they're going to pick 5th, which isn't horrible, but Giants basically could have picked right around 5 with premium assets acquired as well. So I was saying, hey, if the Giants if it's an uninspiring head coaching hire and Joe Schoen is still here, I don't know, how I'm just going to easily, totally just root for them in week one, which, like I said, I probably still would have push comes to shove, but really at the end of the season, while emotions are somewhat raw, it was a real thought in my mind where it's or it could have been like previous seasons where I very quickly pivoted, many times recently, where all it took was for me to see 2, 3, 4 weeks to know, okay, this is going nowhere, and it's in the best interest of the team to lose, which they typically do, but then they find a way to win games late in the season. But I am really, really happy that John Harbaugh is the new Giant head coach. I think that if nothing else, he will bring some stability to this franchise. I'm not saying that the Giants are going to do, amazing, wonderful things as Harbaugh being the head coach, but I'd like to think that he will get them out of this abyss and, out of the cellar is what I'm hoping for. And let's try to break it down as much as we possibly can. As far as just the history of John Harbaugh, of course, the brother of Jim Harbaugh is his younger brother. Jim Harbaugh, was an NFL quarterback. Mostly known with the Chicago Bears and Indianapolis Colts. Jim Harbaugh, that is, led the Colts to a AFC Championship game in '95 where they lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But John Harbaugh, again, Jim's older brother, there's a coaching background there, right? Where their father was a coach. I believe it was at Western Michigan, might have been multiple spots. It was Jack Harbaugh, Western Michigan, and later on Western Kentucky. Um, so it's in the bloodstream. It is in the DNA, the Harbaugh DNA, where head coaching is a thing there and a successful thing there. And for John Harbaugh, as far as his NFL coaching career, it actually begins with the Eagles in 1998 under Ray Rhodes. Ray Rhodes was the head coach at that point. I think Rhodes had been there since maybe 95 or so, or 96. And Harbaugh, after he had basically been a special teams coordinator for a long time at Cincinnati in the college level, and then Indiana for a year, he becomes the special teams coordinator with the Eagles. Now, the interesting thing is Ray Rhodes is let go after 98, and Andy Reid comes in 99, and they retain Harbaugh. They only retain like a few of the coaches from the year before. And Harbaugh had only been there for 1 year, but they keep Harbaugh. And that was a great decision, as John Harbaugh would stay under Andy Reid through 2007. So ultimately, he ends up being there for about 10 seasons, where from 98 to 2006, he's a special teams coordinator. So if you think about it, that's a lot of NFC Championship appearances. That had also one Super Bowl appearance where they lost to the Patriots in the 2004 season. And then in 2007, he becomes a defensive backs coach. And I think that was done as a favor to Harbaugh to kind of help because at the time, it was kind of seen that special teams coordinator didn't really have as much of a chance as far as being a head coach. So he becomes a defensive backs coach for a season. And then the Ravens hire him after a very successful Brian Billick run, which of course Giants sadly know. And, that Billick won a Super Bowl in the 2000 season. And Billick was there as Ravens head coach for, I think, 9 seasons from 99 to 07. But the season prior was not a good one. I think the Ravens were 5-11. And so they hire Harbaugh, who at the time is somewhat of an unknown. I mean, look, it's not as if he was, not to take anything away from Harbaugh, but look, it's not like he was an offensive or defensive coordinator for the Eagles. Obviously, in NFL circles, he was known. He was there for a decade, and was successful as well. That was look, the Eagles under Andy Reid became a very successful team, and even though it's kind of had ebbs and flows to it for sure, they've kind of somewhat carried that forward to present day. And Harbaugh was a part of that. So with the Ravens, it's immediate success. And he is paired up with Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco was drafted that year in the first round. So, it is a Harbaugh-Flacco combo that gets them to the AFC Championship game, where they lose to their rivals, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Steelers going to win the Super Bowl. So they went 11-5. That's a really good first year. 11-5, win a couple of playoff games with Harbaugh. I believe he has the record all time for road playoff victories, I believe, with 8. And as we know, obviously, Tom Coughlin, he had with the Giants alone. Again, I can't speak to Coughlin with the Jags, but Coughlin with the Giants offhand, what was it on the road? 5 games combined between obviously the Super Bowl games are neutral site games, but the 3 in 2007 and then the 2 in 2011. But Harbaugh, of course, accumulated over a longer period of time 8, and so the Ravens kind of had that road warrior thing to them at their biggest heights of success. And really, when you look at a Harbaugh, basically from 08 to either 2012 within the Super Bowl, or you want to extend to 2014, there was so much success there. Playoff appearances every year except for 2013. But, they win the division in 2011, where they lose to the Patriots that was the Billy Cundiff miss, so the Giants almost played the Ravens in 2011 in the Super Bowl. And hey, even 2008, Harbaugh's first year, that was that really good Giant team coming off of the Super Bowl they won the year prior. Like there was almost a collision course a couple of times between the Giants and Ravens, but it didn't quite go that way. But, you know, 2011, things could have turned very differently where the Ravens, hey, that could have been a Super Bowl winning team. Could have been. The Giants won that year, of course, beating the Patriots. But 2012, in kind of somewhat of an unexpected run. Now, the Ravens did win the division, but at a 10-6 record, but they were able, they knock off the really good Broncos in the second round off of that Flacco to Jacoby Jones, I think it was, that long touchdown that really kind of changed everything. And they beat the Niners in the Super Bowl. John Harbaugh beats his younger brother Jim in New Orleans for that Super Bowl win with Joe Flacco as quarterback, which is impressive. Look, Joe Flacco, it's funny. He's still playing today, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But, you know, Joe Flacco, it's not as if Joe Flacco, you know, is like a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's a very good quarterback for sure, with a ton of arm talent. But, you know, that's a impressive job by Harbaugh there for sustained success at Baltimore. And look, the Ravens, like from top down, ownership down, they know what they're doing, right? With Ozzie Newsome for years, like, so there's a lot of credit to go around the whole way. Now, they kind of fall on hard times a little bit. They don't make the playoffs from 15 to 17. They improve steadily, though, to the point where Lamar Jackson is drafted in 2018. And so that's kind of a transition year from Flacco to Jackson, where by the end of it, Lamar Jackson ends up being, I think Flacco got hurt, and I think Lamar takes over. If I remember correctly, I believe that he was the starting quarterback in that playoff loss to the Chargers in the first round. Although something, I feel as if in that game, and I want to confirm it, I want to say that both Jackson and Flacco may have appeared in that one, if memory serves me correct. But again, you know, a home loss there to the Chargers. Let's see here. Lamar Jackson ends up finishing the game, and I'm pretty sure he starts it. Pretty sure it was a Lamar Jackson game. But Jackson in 2019 was unbelievable, to the point where this was an amazing Raven team, and Lamar Jackson wins an MVP award. Lamar Jackson won MVP in 2019 and 2023. They have a disappointing loss to the Titans, though. It's a 14-2 season, and they lose to the Derrick Henry-led Titans. So that was this. I mean, you start to hit a situation where the you know, not great playoff success, but wins thrown in there as well, right? I mean, I would say that, you know, for the Ravens, it's two separate eras. There's the 08 to kind of, you know, let's call it 2014 or 2012 Flacco intensive era. And then it's 2018 to present, or 2024 as far as real Raven success with Lamar Jackson. 2020, they lose to Josh Allen and the Bills after an 11-5 season. They go 8-9 in 2021. They don't make the playoffs there. 2022, they lose to the Bengals in the first round. And what was it? I think Lamar was hurt by then, if memory serves. I think Snoop Huntley was the quarterback. So expectations, they were banged up going in. 2023 was an opportunity. 23 and 24 were missed opportunities, where 13-4 Ravens, number one seed, and they lose it all to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. And then in 2024, where Mark Andrews was unable to make the catch to, you know, prolong the game. I think it would have tied, two-point conversion that would have tied the game. They lose in Buffalo after winning the division, going 12-5. And then, of course, as I just said, Tyler Loop misses a field goal. They lose to the Steelers on the final game of the season to fall short of winning the division. But a lot of great success. He goes 180 and 113 combined in those 18 seasons, and a 13-11 postseason record. That's not too shabby. And the Harbaugh coaching tree is extremely impressive when you really think about it. I mean, it goes back to Rex Ryan, who had success with the Jets early on. But then, you know, really to now, and obviously, look, varying degree, to be fair, varying degrees of success in the middle, if we're being honest. I mean, Vic Fangio, more of a really good defensive coordinator, right, than head coach. But Mike McDonald, I mean, he's one of the best young head coaches out there right now for the Seahawks, and who knows, may lead them to a Super Bowl. But I mean, just even on the coordinator level, where like Jesse Minter, who is going to be who knows, he may end up taking over the Raven job. He may go back to Baltimore. So, what you like about Harbaugh is again building these staffs. It's impressive. I mean, hey, even Wink Martindale, who obviously the Giants know well from 2022 and 2023, he was on Harbaugh's staff. So, right, it doesn't always necessarily lead to head coaches, but it's, if nothing else, very, very solid coordinators on the offensive and defensive side. Maybe more so on the defensive side with Harbaugh, as far as again the coaching tree, but still impressive nonetheless. And I would speaking of the coordinators, I would expect Todd Monken to be the one who was just the most recent Raven offensive coordinator, and is getting looks elsewhere. But he was the guy from 03 to 05, 23 to 25. And he would seem like the most logical guess to be the offensive coordinator. Like, would it be cool if like a Mike McDaniel came around? Yes, but I like that. It's, I don't think there's as much of a connection between those two. He's part of the Shanahan tree, McDaniel. So it's not to say there aren't other interesting offensive minds out there. I personally would, as far as Mike Kafka goes, look, I think that there is interest in him and for other teams for offensive coordinator. For me personally, I think it's best to go in a different direction. I know that, it could be helpful for Jackson Dart to have something familiar from the season before, but I trust Harbaugh enough to have his own offensive minds in there. Again, to transition from Flacco to Lamar Jackson, that I think is one of the most impressive things that Harbaugh did, that he totally reestablished and changed the whole look of the offense. I mean, those are two completely different quarterbacks. Flacco, not mobile at all, pure passer, pocket passer. Lamar Jackson uses his legs like crazy. And they were really able to make that work in not much time. Very seamless transition. Defensive coordinator wise, that one's a little bit more up for debate. And I don't want it to be Zach Orr, who is the most recent, or technically current Raven defense coordinator. I would not want it to be him. But there are other interesting candidates. Hey, if you want to go from the Jesse Minter staff with the Chargers, like I think that's a place to go. I don't know, maybe even the Mike McDonald one with the Seahawks. I think that there's probably places to go, and maybe names you haven't heard of, but maybe also names you have. I'm not really sure Denard Wilson's situation, and maybe he wants the team back up with Harbaugh. But I'm not too concerned about what that might bring. But I think with the OC, I feel that there's more certainty with Monken. I'm not quite as sure with the DC. But like I said, he's really had more arguable sustained success with the DCs, or at least the defensive coaches on his staff. The funny thing is there's Wink Martindale, but Wink Martindale, even though Dable's gone, Joe Shane was part of that as well. So I think there's no love lost between Shane and Martindale. So I don't see that happening, but it would be kind of funny if it did. So yeah, I think, it's a very exciting time right now. One of the most sort of optimistic periods of time. And again, things can change very quickly, but I think that this will probably be sustained for a while. We'll see what the offseason holds. It's not going to be an easy offseason for the Giants and Joe Shane and John Harbaugh and what direction they go. There's a lot of tough decisions being made as far as impending free agents. The draft is going to be very important. Like, there's a lot of work to be done here, right? Like, this is just the beginning, and I think it's a major leap and a huge step taken for John Harbaugh to be the New York Giants head coach. But again, this roster has a lot of holes and is only going to become tougher if you do lose some of these free agents. And if you do, like, that could be with valid reason, but then they have to be replaced, right? The offensive line did a pretty good job this year, but that, I mean, 2/5 of that line may not be intact at the very least. Could be more than that even potentially. But yeah, I think the power structure to me is going to be very interesting. And it may not be something that we'll ever really totally know, right? If there is success, like you can only just kind of assume and guess as to what it will look like. But I think that Joe Shane is going to take an approach of really letting John Harbaugh have a major say in things. And how could you not? But and as much as I'm not a fan of Joe Shane, I still think that hopefully there's that respect on both ends for both to do their jobs. Because you've seen it before, right? Where like Bill Belichick, great head coach. But when it comes to player personnel decisions, that's a totally different situation. But I guess what you're kind of hoping for is that this can become, you look at really the Patriots and the Bears as the prototype where Mike Vrabel was hired. And again, there's that connection that he had with the Patriots, right? You know, you can't forget about that. But Elliott Wolf, really um, did not really have a great track record. But you hire Mike Vrabel and the whole thing changes. Same thing with the Bears. Ryan Poles wasn't doing a great job. Wasn't 100% horrible. But Ben Johnson comes in, and of course, it helps that you already have Drake May with New England, Caleb Williams with the Bears. In the case of the Giants, Jackson Dart, hopefully, can be an upper echelon quarterback. Early returns are solid, but that's what you're looking for. It can be done. It's somewhat rare, but Joe Shane can be saved, and the situation can be salvaged for sure with the right head coach in place, and of course, that quarterback head coaching combination. And it's pretty awesome the fact that Jackson Dart did well enough to the point that that definitely played into the decision for John Harbaugh. That's a good job, right? So, and I want to give the Giants a lot of credit for landing John Harbaugh. And look, I think that it was a lot of things went their way as well, right? There's a little bit of luck involved in terms of the timing and in terms of the teams the Giants were going up against, right? It seemed like the Falcons and Titans were the closest competition. And no offense to those teams, but again, they're not really flagship franchises and they haven't had great success lately. But hey, as much as I've been really critical of John Mara, who, again, hopefully, I hope he's doing all right health wise. He was very much involved in this. Chris Mara, his brother, really seemed like he made a full court press. Steve Tisch, who we don't see too often, he was involved. They had Eli Manning, Tom Coughlin. I think Brian Dable even spoke to John Harbaugh. I think mostly probably, for Jackson Dart, as those two had a really good connection and relationship, but they really did pull out all the stops. Jackson Dart himself, so I really do want to give the Giants a ton of credit. They nailed this. They really, it wasn't like he was, while it feels like he kind of did fall into their lap, a lot of work needed to be done to make this happen to the point where John Harbaugh didn't even want to continue, further, communications with, again, the Titans and the Falcons, just to name a few, right? I'm sure there were other teams that were kind of hoping for it, but at the end of the day, all signs are pointing to John Harbaugh, agreeing to a deal to become the new head boss with the New York Giants. And let's hope that this is the beginning of a turnaround. It's been really tough ever since that second Super Bowl, except a couple of years, 2016 and 2022. It's been rough, right? I mean, however many seasons that's been now, what, 13 or so? 14, maybe 4, I guess that's probably about 14 seasons, where you missed 12 out of 14, I believe is the number, maybe 11 out of 13, somewhere in that range. And most of them really being horrible, not even being in it at all. I mean, the Giants and the Jets, I think, have the two worst records in the last, accumulating from the last decade. So, the Giants have really, their reputation has really gone totally, down the drain. But I think that something like this has the ability to bring it back. And it would just be so exciting for the Giants to become a team that really year in, year out is in the conversation, at least just for playoffs, right? I mean, 7 out of 16 teams make it. It's not that difficult. And the last thing I'll say here is, as much as you need to see how the roster looks, as much as I have a lot of doubts, and look, as far as John Harbaugh goes, and we'll be lucky if we can even get to this point, the Ravens had a lot of tough losses down the stretch. But not down the stretch, just over the course of the Harbaugh tenure, but I think more so within the last maybe 5 years in the Lamar Jackson era, so many blown leads and really, really, really difficult losses. So, hey, he doesn't, he is not perfect. There are things here that I think in-game situations and decisions, and again, even in that last Ravens-Steeler game, there were criticisms as far as the way that was handled, right? So this is far from, the absolute, he's got no problems head coach. But the the point that I was going to make as far as Harbaugh goes, um, is that I think that, at the end of the day, this is someone that you want to bring some semblance of stability to this franchise. And I think that he is the best fit to do that at this point in time. So again, John Harbaugh is going to become the new head coach of the New York Giants. I was hoping that this would happen, and it has come to fruition. And let's hope that this can be the turnaround the New York Giants really need. John Harbaugh is a New York Giant.